We're ready.
We are now recording the December 14th, 2018 Small Business Accounting Advisors. Hello, everyone.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. It's Matt's big day today. He gets to show us Vendor Sync. So, Matt, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. I want to start off by telling a little story that most of the people here probably know, but just in case they don't. This was the webinar that Vendor Sync was the very first time was ever mentioned. And it was by Sarah High Pockets Laidlaw. The funny thing was, I was literally watching it on a Saturday evening, and I was writing an email to Sarah, wanting to reach out and connect to her because I wanted to talk to another accountant who had been going through the journey of having an accounting firm and developing an app. When your group was playing in the background, and all of a sudden somebody said something about Vendor Sync, and I stopped and I'm like, that can't be right. So I rewound it, listened to it. It was awesome. I'm literally writing a letter to the person who mentioned it for the first time. Man, I lit up like a Christmas tree, called my mom, called everybody I knew. I was like, they mentioned Vendor Sync. So thank you. Thank you for letting me now demonstrate it here. So on to the serious stuff. Vendor Sync was developed. I always like to tell everybody that basically after we transferred most of our clients from desktop to online, we came up with a desktop application. And most people are usually trying to transfer to the cloud because of efficiencies. They're looking for ways to get more work done in less time, and bank rules is a very, very popular portion of that. So I started working on ways to try to improve the bank feeds first for desktop and enterprise, I should say, and that's what developed Vendor Sync. In QuickBooks Desktop, if you're familiar, you've got the ability through your vendor list that you can actually go in and, you can assign a category per vendor. So let me share my screen. I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So in basic QuickBooks, if you want to go in, you can go to a vendor here, right? And if you click and you take the time to edit, you can come in, you can go to account settings, and you could type in, I want this to go to software expense. That's great. If you've got 400 vendors, most people are not going to want to do that. They're not going to take the time to 8 clicks, go through every single little piece of it. So we came up with an application that allows us to pull both your entire vendor list and your full chart of accounts so we can create the relationship between the two and then push it back down into QuickBooks. Then the most important part is you have to be able to have on the transaction side, you have to have the right payee name. So there's so many different apps out there that try to clean up a bank memo, right? Or do this or do that. But nobody actually references the right name. So if you pull in transactions, it doesn't do any good. So Vendor Sync starts off first by putting that power in your hands that you can pull through the web connector, your entire list of your vendors, and you can come in and you can just categorize them all one at a time if you want it. We know that if you've got 400 vendors, you're probably not going to go through and do them one at a time. You could, it would be great, but for the best workflow, we actually developed to where when you pull your transactions in, which I'm about to do, you assign payee names at the very end. Every time you have a payee that doesn't have a category set up to it, it will pull up a list at the end and make you categorize it right at that time. So you can basically just go through and categorize the ones you're using right then, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So this is Vendor Sync at the moment. This is your dashboard. When you set up and you connect your web connector, it's going to, again, pull in all of your chart accounts and all of your vendors, and you'll notice immediately that under accounts, any bank or credit card will automatically be listed over here because they'll be the ones that you're going to be pulling transactions into. With that, if I go to my checking account, it's also very important that there has to be what's known as an Intuit Bank ID number for you to pull transactions in. If you don't have that listed, that's why some banks will not be recognized by QuickBooks Desktop. So if you have like a credit union that normally is not supported, we can get you past that. All you would do is you make a connection first, choose your financial institution. I'm going to go easy here and go Chase. select it, and save it. So that is an important part that actually allows you to pull transactions in, because when we create a custom export file in a moment, it's going to have that in there for you. So real quickly, I'm going to pull in my transactions. I've got a file real quick here. I'll go to my downloads here. And when I pull my transactions in, it's going to actually give me a nice display that we can start to go through. And we need to be able to basically add in pay names, categorize the transactions as much as we can. So this is the primary screen you're going to look at most of the time. What we've done is, if the bank memo has the actual payee name inside of it and it matches to something within your vendor list that's already there, it will automatically suggest a payee name for you. And that's what these little indicators are. If it doesn't exist, nothing will be populated. And then you can still go through and search. So as you develop out your vendor names, you start to have more and more auto-suggested, of course. Okay? We've also done a couple extra features, such as this one's for you, Sarah. Edit dates. So if you're dealing with checks, you want to be in line with accrual-based accounting, you can actually go in, change the date of the transaction to match your accounting, the actual date on the check itself, as well as the ability to play with and edit memos. So let's go through and let's pull up some. I'm going to change my number of transactions that you can play with here to something a little bit bigger. And we'll see we've got like a BAVC check here, right? We don't have a matching vendor that is inside there. BAVC is the Bookkeepers Association. So I can come in and I can very easily add a vendor as I'm going along, so you don't mess up your workflow. Which you can also then assign in a category right off the bat, so it makes that relationship that's going to be really important again. On purpose, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it without it so you guys can see that at the end, if I have vendors that don't have the categories, it will pull up a pop-up list to make it easier. So let's go real quickly, go add vendor. And with all of these ones that are auto-suggested, I'm feeling a little lazy, so I'm going to come in and we could review them all and check them off and choose them, or I can go accept all suggestions. It's going to process through. And when we have vendor names that have a category already assigned to it, it will reference them on the side here. So notice how, change the color, right? Susie Helper, we already have in here, shows with a subcontractor. I'll sort by these and you'll see more of them. That's because there's a relationship between that vendor and an account already. But if, again, it's a visual way to see that the connection has been made, okay? You also have the ability, let's say you've got a brand new account and you don't have a whole bunch of suggestions being made. We've given you the ability to do a filter here also through the memo. So Microsoft is my one I always like to demonstrate. So if you go MSFT, because that's always part of their bank memo. If you'll notice, we don't have a vendor name here. I can come in, I can click the top box, which auto selects all of those. Come to my vendor here, type in Microsoft. If it's not there, add it. Since it is, select it and update them. So you're batch editing the payee names on these as well. Okay, so the goal is we're trying to find ways to get rid of the clicks as much as we possibly can. At that point, you could clear it out then and continue to go through, try to process. You'll see on the export date, I point this out because obviously we haven't exported any transactions yet at this time, but as you're using this month after month after month, you need to know which ones you've exported and which ones you haven't, because you don't want to duplicate transactions. So we have that information there as well. We would go through, and I'll actually hit the pay name to bring up any blanks we have left. Try that again. There we go. So this is basically, besides the one suggested, this is about what we have left, not very much. So let's go through, and we've got like stamps. I can just come down here and I could go stamps.com, or I want to show the filtering again so a better understanding of it. I can type in the least common denominator of it, right? Click. So if there's a lot more, boom, and update. So you would continue through, you would process as many of these as you could. And I'll leave a couple of these blank. I'll just do Time Warner here real quick. Time Warner, we'll do one at a time so you can see that aspect. And then once everything is done, you're going to want to export all of your transactions. So if I click the top box here, I've got my largest settings set up. You could shrink down how many you wish. And again, you can always do individual checks, boom, boom, that kind of thing. But we like the ability to do the select all as well, a little bit faster. And I'm going to come into here, I'm going to go export my transactions as selected ones. And remember before I was talking about if you've got payees in there, but it doesn't actually have a category connected to it, right? You get this pop-up screen. So now by going through this, it will actually give you the ability that we can go AT&T. Okay, well, let's put that to telephone. Next one, cash on hand. So it's only doing the ones that actually were being processed at this time. So again, 400 vendors, doesn't matter. Deal with what you've got at the moment and keep adding on. When I'm done with this and I go through all of these, what I'll do is I'll actually come in and then sync all of these back to QuickBooks Desktop and create those relationships. So we'll do utilities, so forth, okay? With that, my sync at the bottom here. I did a little bit too large of an area here for these, so I'll real quickly just refresh and do a smaller size. Got a little overzealous. So I'm going to click only 50 transactions here. Boom, go export. There we go. So a little bit too big a size before, as you probably saw. So Coral Tree software, Del Taco meals, deposits, we'll just do that for now. I will take all the ones I've got here and let's real quickly go sync to QuickBooks. So you really should go through, of course, and do all of them, but nobody wants to sit here and watch me type all of them in, of course. What this is doing is we've got the web connector, and in a moment here, we will see that it's actually going to do its auto run, and it's going to pull all those details in and update those vendors. So like Coral Tree, we have software expense, right? It just dropped my file I asked for. I'm going to come here. Let's go look at Coral Tree. Puts in software expense. If I add vendors, adds vendors. If I add accounts, adds accounts, all the way through the process. So you don't have to interrupt any of that. Now, we just did only a couple actual vendors and such, but let's go to banking, go to bank feeds. Let's go import. We'll take that file that we just messed with, right? Go to downloads, oops. And now, this is an important one. Checking. The naming of the file shows the beginning date, ending date, checking, and number on the actual file that's being exported, so it's easy to recognize which file you're actually trying to pull in when you're doing it. We've never imported anything in, so this is standard. You go in, choose the account, click continue, and we've pulled in data. So we just did the 50 on the page, and you saw how many we did. We're going to click transaction list. Zero rules, nothing whatsoever created, okay, guys? And we didn't go through everything. If I actually do some more, we'll get through more of them. Immediately, 27 out of those 50, because we just did a couple names, automatically suggested for you to review and accept. So now, if we think about it, and we were to actually do just a couple more, we could actually sync it through. So let's do, I'll show you, we'll do Notify. Kind of a funny way to do this, but watch. Let's go back to our vendor list here. Let's pull up Notify. Let's give it a software. Do one more so we get a bigger amount. A Coffee Bean looks good, or Intuit. Pull this back up. Meals. And let's just sync that stuff back again. When I click the sync, I like pulling the web connector up because with it being open, because you get to see when it's doing it. But 27 in a second here is going to increase when it actually starts to categorize those, starts adding them in. So the Notify one went away right off the bat. Coffee Bean, we didn't actually name the transactions in there. So it just goes to show the sync is actually two-way sync for the vendor and the accounts back and forth, and that you can go through and process the transactions. An important part, if you have somebody that is actually working in QuickBooks, they're writing checks in QuickBooks, so some of the transactions are there. The reason we go through the bank feed and we don't try to go through the back end is because we want to make sure we don't cause duplication. So if you have transactions in the system, they will be matched. They'll actually auto-suggest a match for you. So you have the ability to not create the duplicates, better control for all of it. So our ultimate goal, if we went through the whole workflow and we took the time to go through, clear through these transactions the right way and make sure they had all the categories, you now start getting to the point where all of your data entry is basically pretty close to handled for you. So that's a quick overview. I'd like to open up to questions on it, and that way I left more transactions so I can actually show with examples of answers with examples. Who's got some questions for me?
Mariette, can you unmute?
Hi, Mariette.
Mariette's asking if there are two sync steps. First, report new vendors and new accounts, and second, import bank accounts. Is that correct?
Good question. So our process when you're going through and you're doing your export, I should say you're doing your export for vendor sync and the information, it will automatically pull up, and it's looking at each of the different payee names that you put in, and it's trying to see if there's a missing category for them. So when that happens, it will automatically pull that pop-up screen and ask you to create the relationship. Once that's done, it gives you the sync button, and that way you push that sync and it then spits out the actual bank file. The only thing you have to import into QuickBooks yourself is you would then import that bank file through the bank feeds like you would have normally done straight from the bank. We're an intermediary step that way.
So, perfect. So, Matt, that's perfect. That's a good answer. That answers my question. But I guess when I was seeing you do it, it looked like you first did something where you like exported, and then you showed us that vendors were created based on those vendor names, and then that new chart of accounts were created based on the chart of accounts. You showed that first when you went into QuickBooks Desktop, and then you showed us that then you have to go to the process of bank feeds, import bank files. So there's two different things that got imported then right? Because that's what it looked like you did.
Yeah, so thank you very much. That's a very good question. What the sync with the web connector does is it will actually take, as I was saying, the vendors and the chart of accounts, if you needed to add new ones, because it's not a direct live connection. Anything you do in vendor sync, if you add a vendor there, or if you edit a vendor, any of those things, you would then tell it to sync back to desktop to push the information in. Where that comes into play is why we do that is, again, you can have a payee name by going through this process and assigning a payee name. We create a special export file that then has that payee name in the proper field, so QuickBooks will recognize it. If we don't do that sync first and make that relationship, when it got there, the information would be missing. So the sync portion of it is the vendors and the accounts in the relationship. Then you do your work on the transactions by putting, suggesting the payee name or accepting the payee names in it, and then exporting it out. 2 months down the road, starting to see, all the same vendors over and over and over again, more and more and more would be auto-suggested, and you'd be able to do that one-click suggest. You should review it, of course, but one-click suggest, export, and you keep reducing it. Very similar to like bank feed rules in QuickBooks Online.
So it learns as you use it.
Exactly. So did that answer it better, Mariette?
Yes, that was perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Who
Hey,
else?
Matthew, I came in late. What is this product?
This is VendorSync. This is the app I've been working on for the last couple of years. It's a QuickBooks desktop application. I say desktop, we focused there first on purpose, but we've already mapped out other solutions that will be a little bit in the future, but they'll be coming. And it helps reduce all the data entry for bookkeepers and accountants focused on desktop and enterprise.
I love that. I need to take a look. I came in the middle, but I'll go back and review the recording when it's posted. But I love the idea so far and what I saw of it.
I'll give you a personalized demo. How about we do that after?
Even better.
Awesome. So, part of the way that we've set everything up at this time, the structure of the data in here, it's a very easier, it won't take too many changes for us to implement QuickBooks Online as well in the near future, but we really focused on desktop on purpose. QuickBooks Desktop is still, I should say the desktop environment is still actually a larger revenue generator for Intuit than the cloud. Most people don't recognize that. There's over 250,000, well, Brandon, you probably know these numbers better, over 250,000 subscriptions or licenses sold per quarter for desktop still. And it's an environment that a lot of people seem to have forgotten when it comes to development. And we felt it was a good pain point we could really help a lot of accounts with and also help them control some of their expenses that way.
Yeah, I agree. We actually had a discussion during the council meeting today. The Intuit numbers, because it's a public company, desktop is still 50% of the revenue for Intuit. So the conversation always goes, hey, is desktop dead? Is desktop dead? No. It's still 50% of their income. So it's not going away anytime soon. As a matter of fact, they're putting more resources toward it. For those that went to scaling, they should have heard that as well. But desktop is not going anywhere, especially enterprise.
Awesome. Out of everybody that's here, how many people are familiar and have worked with the web connector one way or another? So if you talk to just about anybody that's ever had to deal with the QuickBooks web connector, it's the bane of everybody's existence most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time.
We've done some I can't say my software developer, Casey, is phenomenal, and he's done some amazing things. He was able to establish a QuickBooks web connector that you install the web connector one time on a computer, and then you link any additional company files. So if I want to create a new company file, I would click Add New Company, be able to go through the whole process, and I just link it directly to it. But I don't have to keep installing a web connector and web connector. What it also lets us do is, let's say right now I'm on my desktop at home, or I'm in the office, right? But tonight I got to get the work done, so I got to go home. Well, you could process all the data through the cloud in VendorSync, but then if you use QBox, I could open up the file at my house. I can link it to 2 different computers, and it maps all that stuff together. It's been a very difficult part, but it's a pretty neat little feature.
So is this a replacement to Intuit's Web Connector that just happens to work with QuickBooks?
It is using Intuit's Web Connector. It's using their whole process. In the future, we will probably build our own instead, but we did this to where you do not have to install an exe file on your computer. There's
Gotcha.
no program to actually install there.
That is super cool.
I definitely would love people's feedback when they're playing with that part of it, because we know it's a 50-50 shot. If I went one way, people would suggest the other way. If I went the other way, they would tell me this way. So, what else? What other questions? Anybody else have any questions or feedback? Possibly?
Matt, I have another question, Mariette. So just to kind of understand, so like, let's say for instance, I have my desktop client and I just want to make sure, am I using vendor sync first, like to do all that pre-work and then pushing to desktop? That's the idea, right?
Yes. And the purpose of it, thank you for asking it that way. And then Linda, I'll come to you, Linda Russell. So in the old school days, what would happen is you would go straight from the bank, you'd pull it in, and you'd be filling in line by line each one of these transactions, right? When you'd be doing that, a couple things would happen. You're going through at a good clip and you're getting a whole bunch of them in, and then you come across a vendor that's not there and you're silly and you accidentally hit the add button before you pushed everything in. So now everything disappears because you put the add in and you're having to go back in and fill pays and categories every single time, right? It's kind of a tedious process. Or you could also go through and you could create bank rules, right? Difficulty is in QuickBooks Desktop, if you want to create rules, it requires a name at the beginning, which means you have to create so many rules to make them worth anything. And if you create a lot of rules in QuickBooks Desktop, it bogs the program down. It really starts to slow it down dramatically. So we will create two rules. We'll create a deposit rule. So when he deposits money in, we always put to like revenue query, because our process makes it to where we then go back and match deposits, the different parts, so forth. And then we also do one for checks, that if it says check, we'll push it to, ask my account, sort check, whatever you would like, because that way you can either have them and then remove it, or you can go back and put the appropriate account onto it. Because we don't have check images at the moment for it to be pulled, but that's where actually it's kind of nice when you match it up with like Ledger Sync. You can populate the check name in before you push it in if you actually had the image, and it'd be great. But if you didn't have that part, you would just capture those two things. It's the last part that really are the outliers. So we figure by doing it this way, less transactions need to have clicks, less, you're hitting the keyboard less is the whole point. Linda Russell, you had a question.
Yes. I do a very unusual thing with naming people on the vendor list.
Okay.
Because there's sometimes like I have the name Linda Russell as maybe a 1099 vendor. So I have the name Linda Russell, and then this is on the vendor list, the display name. And then right after Linda Russell in parentheses, it says 1099. So then I also have Linda Russell on the vendor list where I have it say parentheses REIMB, where I'm being
Okay.
They're not paying me for something I did for them. They're reimbursing me. I stopped at Staples on the way and I bought some office supplies. I also might be the owner of the S Corp or something. And so then I'd be on the other name list as Clint Jackson owner.
Good point.
Will your vendor sync be able to, and I have rental, I have apartments where the rental units, it's important that the rental units be, the electric bill be assigned to the particular unit it is, kind of thing. So I have Southern California Edison, and then I have the last 4 digits of that account number.
Okay.
that goes one place, and then another one goes in. Can we map that? Probably. It sounds like you certainly could.
Good. Check it out. So we go new vendor. Let's just call it SCE-1122.
Yeah, that'll work.
And we do utilities. So the key to this is vendor name, select the account.
Right. And
So-
it might match up with what comes in on the memo from the bank. I don't know.
So what would happen there is the auto suggest portion of it is not going to be as effective for you because it's not going to see the exact name. Because you're not going to have in the memo SCE-1122. Now, if you named it using a portion of the memo, you could play with it that way. In the future, and I don't wish to overpromise, underdeliver, I can't say it's going to be immediately, but I actually want us to be able to have aliases where we'd have another section down here and you could create like an alias, like a rule basically, that it would look at that, reference it, and then could change the name as well. But that's going to be a bit in the future, and my software developer is going to kill me for saying it already. So,
I hear you, and you don't know when because you don't know what the demand is for that.
yeah, I've recently been talking more about the software development process and what they call the MVP, the minimum viable product. And it's so important. I think that a lot of app companies, they don't get an accountant on board immediately, whether it's paid or just as a partnership, to be able to truly check the outputs of the app to make sure it's good. We have been, obviously as an accountant, we're able to do that right from the beginning. So we know we've got to do certain things to make sure the app is going to pass the bookkeeper accountant test, because as I was saying before, we can accept errors in the UI UX, the look of it, but we can't accept accounting errors. The accounting error, like, it's got to be right on the dot.
Yeah.
That's also why we go through the bank feed area. So everybody else likes to go through the SDK and push it in and create checks and everything else behind the scenes, but that leads to duplicate transactions. I personally, I could be unique. I want the ability that I can still come in here because I know that this one-time lows, if I'm a contractor, maybe that one-time lows was actually repair and maintenance for your own building instead of materials every time. So I want that last little bit to make that final decision. It also lets you, every feature you can do through the bank feed. So if you need to do splits, if you want to add classes on, there's no way to pass that through a QBO, but you can do it from here, just like normal. So it really just enhances the bank feeds without taking away any of the extra functionality. Gina, you got any questions for me?
No, but Nancy Smith does. Nancy Smith, you have not met yet. She has been with us since the very beginning. She has her own program, Sunburst Software Solutions, and she's asking about the web connector.
I just pulled up the chat to see that. So good question, Nancy. Can you really replace the, you can?
Doesn't that go against Intuit's, for lack of a better word, rules?
I think most of the people that are on here probably tell you sometimes I'm not the best at following rules, so I should check that.
Well, I get you. Because, I mean, we're third-party developers too, and, some of the rules that Intuit places on developers is...
It's tough.
Well, that's a much better word than I was going to say.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of wondering about that, and would you guys get in trouble?
Don't tell on me.
You don't have to answer me. Just it's like something to think about.
I'm willing to, I'm actually willing to spend some time with you with our developer. We're always about sharing ideas and trying to help each other out. If there's something we can do, let's learn from each other. I don't want to make this, I want a smooth road, not a bumpy one.
And the other thing is, how do you job cost this stuff? Everything I see is set to accounts. I deal with contractors, job costing. Accounts don't cut it in job costing.
You're right.
Other than that, this looks pretty, this looks like way better than a lot of things I've seen.
Thank you. I have literally probably tried just about every data import tool there is on the market. It does not directly handle job costing for one primary reason. We are limited to what a QBO or an OFX file, I'm sorry, just a QBO file can push through. When we were developing this app, I went off the premise that if you can summarize a business by money in the bank, money out of the bank, that means the least common denominator is the bank memo. And if we can try to figure out what we can do to capture that bank memo and still use the input file that's allowed, a .qbo file, there's only certain fields that can actually be populated inside there to do something. I'm working on splits. I should be able to do splits, but the job costing, there's no place. I mean, you could get creative. This isn't the right answer, but you could get creative by the payee name, and because that would be expensive. So the best way is you get the data in, you have to go to the add more details, just like traditional.
So I can see on this screen that you have up here that you can assign it to customer job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, theoretically,
it's not any harder than it already was, is a key thing. And the initial part of getting the payee and the category, that it still handles that, just as you would do now, where you'd actually have to kind of go in and break it up if you're going to do a split or assign it. You would still do that same portion this way.
But theoretically, it is job costing. When you
Yes.
put in your customer job, it will actually assign it to the job. But when you go and look at your job costing reports, it'll show up as no item, as opposed to actually going into your excavation or whatever, which I know.
that is like a deal breaker.
No.
You know, I mean,
So if I obviously don't have a customer in here, we're just going to go boom. If I go billable, right?
It has nothing to do with the billable, though.
no, it's just that here
It's
I'm
the
pointing
item.
with the mouse, that customer job column. I just want that transaction costed out to that customer.
Well, to an item, right? 'Cause
Well, I
this
would
will job
rather
cost-
have it to an item, but obviously he can't do it to an item.
Yeah, but it is doing it to the customer here.
So let's go.
Now,
No, just go to the customer center, go to Mark. Maybe it's because it was a withdrawal.
no.
It was an expense. So, I mean, I should be able to pull up a profitability by customers, what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Reports.
Yep. Let's see here.
Net company and financial would work, and profit and loss by job
By
or
job.
customer. Yeah.
Now, I didn't name it as a job, though, but I can go back and do that real quick, too, right?
There you go.
Okay, so there's the $260. If you drill down in on it,
But if he put a job on it, it would actually be able to job cost it. Like that's just a customer level, right?
Correct.
right?
So,
But still, I mean, the guys I deal with that actual versus estimate,
mhm.
It'll just show up as no item on that job cost report.
yeah, which really doesn't help them out at all.
Well, it does because it would obviously be all materials because labor would come through your payroll, wouldn't come through your bank feed.
Yeah, but if they had, I deal with the big guys. So if they've got excavation and they figure it's going to cost them $5,000. They want to see how much they actually spent.
Agreed.
They don't want to see all of that stuff lumped in, no item assigned, and then have to export that to Excel and, kind of split it out based on vendor and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's a good point. What that would require, and actually really thank you. These are the things that are so powerful because, hey, it's going to guide us. To do the job costing, we're talking about items, which it does go back to the idea of pushing things in through the back end. Now, that is absolutely something we could do. If I would love feedback as to, what people think. If they like the idea of it going into the back end, I really get concerned on that. What would happen though is if you did have somebody that was already putting those items in, then it would match to existing items inside the system. So you wouldn't cause duplication. It would be able to reconcile out so you wouldn't have doubles. But the only way I could see that we could do the job costing is we would have to be able to push the data through the backside, and we would need on our display to then be able to do breakout splits, so forth. And it just starts to expand this so much more.
No, I get it. I know these guys are dealing with, hundreds of vendor bills every week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have other clients we could help you with though?
No, sorry. Just construction.
Okay.
Wait till you hear me swear, you'll know.
I definitely understand the pain point. So what our goal has always been, we felt this was the good pain point we could launch our first application with, but there is so much more that we have got planned, and we just need to launch the first one, build a good piece, build up the reputation of building good quality products, and we can do more. I'm very, very lucky. I have a US-based software developer in my office. He's an amazing developer that that is really, really hard. So.
Yeah, my husband writes all of our code.
Okay. It's a definite journey. That's for sure. It's a definite journey.
Yeah. But no, this looks really good as a start. I mean, it seems to be smoother and more streamlined. It definitely like the ability to get everything taken care of before you do that import.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So kudos for that.
Any features? I mean, your question about job costing was great. From everybody, are there other features, things that, because it's kind of the ground floor, now is a great time to ask me if it does this or that before we get 12,000 people asking us all for new features and they can't accomplish them?
Well, I noticed that we're focusing on banking sides, but obviously the credit card, right?
Absolutely, credit cards too.
Okay, yeah, just the terminology, but I love it. I'm so excited that I showed up today to see this.
So the next questions are, where's our affiliate links and pricing?
So at the moment, our the biggest challenge that I've had at this time is truly trying to make the most appropriate pricing and the value. What I'd like to ask of my friends here, if possible, is I'd love to get everybody who can use it. Please help me beat this thing up. We're getting right at the beginning of the season, and I would love to be able to ask each person like what they feel pricing should be at. It's pricing. Nancy, maybe you've got some advice on this. Pricing is tough. Trying to make it understandable, make it a good value, but at the same time, make it to where you don't have somebody like Sarah went through trying to just kind of pass out licenses and rip you off. Any input, Nancy?
Licensing is horrid. Pricing is even more so. After 18 years, it still drives me insane.
Where I've been at it at this time and what my plan was, the plan is to basically set up a simple pricing structure where it would be by company file. But we would do like a 10-pack of company files. So every time you add a new company, you can do as much as you want with it, no per transaction, none of that type of stuff. You would do up to 10 company files, and it would be like $120 a month. Again, this is very informal. This is me just spilling out some ideas.
So I have to ask you, there's got to be two different type of people that are you're selling to. Pro advisors that have clients that are using it for their clients, but also clients too.
Yes. So first off, we all know as pro advisors, we want to have something we can use for ourselves. So we will absolutely be offering pro advisors a free company file. That's where the idea of the company file is great, because you can't take advantage of it by trying to work every single company and get them all done. We plan to develop like everybody else, some form of a badge type system that when we set up training, if you go through the training, you will get a second company file for free as well. So you can have a test one, you can do whatever you need with that. We will also do a single company file price point. So if it's a single business, they can do just that one company file and make sure it's a good value. These are the complexities of pricing, is how do you accommodate all of that? Any thoughts so far towards it? Does it sound like it's the right way?
Can I say something?
Please, Linda.
Okay. I think you need to have a lower one than 10, maybe 5, because when it's desktop, you don't have as many customers because it takes more work to do the desktop work. So, like a 5-pack maybe?
Definitely. We can do that. And this is probably a less popular concept with Intuit, but we have quite a few clients ourselves that have always been online, but they never look at the books. We've always ran it there because it was more efficient. This now gives us the ability, we can take some of those people at $60 a month retail off online, back to desktop, still maintain the efficiency and reduce our monthly expense. We can actually pull back a little bit of that profitability. And that's not going to work for everybody, because look, I'm not trying to change the world on the fact online's efficient, but it doesn't have to be that desktop's inefficient. So I like the five seems like a good way to go.
And maybe a little bit more than what you get for 10, right? So if you're going to give the 10 at, would you say 120, then maybe do something like, it's just more because it's less, so that it costs more per unit.
So we want to do a tiered structure, but it's got to be like 3, because if we all know there's different apps out there that the pricing just gets really confusing.
Yes, I hate that.
But at the same time, you don't want just a $20 per company file, right? That gets real expensive real fast. Okay, we offer additional company licenses. Thank you. Most providers run like hell from. Yes. The other thing that we plan to do, one of the most difficult things for a lot of people, like small business owners, if you've got one of those weird banks that just will not work, like you go to pull it in, it just says, sorry, your bank, or you're having difficulty with a branding issue with your bank, something of that nature, it's because it doesn't have a proper Intuit ID number. So I wanted to set up where people could literally pull the file in, easily just change Intuit ID number and make it to where they could import the transactions. We would offer something like that where it would be a no charge, but you wouldn't be able to edit anything. You wouldn't be able to do anything else. You would just be able to make it to where your download, it would be like a basic file converter in a sense. And the goal there, of course, is, hey, we're going to show you the features of what you can do because it is a good value. It is a great value. So if you've had issues where bank files won't go in, we can help solve that.
Awesome.
Brandon, any other questions from you? You're a desktop king out there, right?
I wish. I will definitely have some questions, I'm sure, when I'm able to see it from start to end. And probably offline, I noticed we're recording, I would have some more, maybe some suggestions as far as once it's a little bit more beat up and we kind of a little bit more solid, some other ways that you could help get it to market. But no, right now I have no more questions. I like what I see, though.
Thank you, guys.
And I can't think of a better person than Sunburst to have on here watching this and helping you beat it up. She's a rock star.
Well, thank you, Brandon.
Hey, we don't get to talk much, but everybody that uses your stuff loves you. So
thank you, guys. So I appreciate the chance to do a demonstration again, and I'm happy to do individual demos with everybody. Just again, thank you guys for the support this whole time. It's helped.
You got it. We love having you here, and we'll do this again. But for now,
Can I just ask one more question?
Oh, go ahead.
So Matthew, what I love about this is that it will give normal people the ability to batch enter transactions when you can't do it except with the accountant's version. So I have some pretty, large corporations that do a lot of batch entry stuff, and they have to have somebody doing the entry. So this will get around that ability.
Yes.
Thank you. One of my marketing things I'm planning to do, this is not necessarily a competitive app. It's a complementary app.
Yes.
If you use Ledger Sync, you export your transactions, even your credit cards, you pull it in. It's an extra step, but it still saves you time. Do the legwork here. If you use HubDoc and you want to be able to use it with QuickBooks Desktop, take the CSV file from HubDoc, pull it out, put it into here, process the transactions faster, push it in. There's so many things. Auto entry, like all of these different ones, because it's very finite of what it's trying to do, and it's really solving the problem, you can make it complementary with so many things. Awesome. Gina, thank you again.
Checking then IIF, people say. Yay.
Yeah.
All righty, Matt. Thank you very much. We're going to end our recording for now. We'll see you all same time, same place next week. Okay. So.